Hello, you beautiful creatures.
Welcome to Frass Happens, a podcast where we teach you shit about insects. I'm your host, Casey.
And I'm your host, Katie. For today's episode, we are going to give you a little insect anatomy crash course. But before we get into that, we would first like to extend a huge thank you to everyone who has been listening to and generally supporting the podcast so far.
Our goal with this podcast is to share our love and appreciation of insects with as many people as possible, so that everyone can get to know, love, and hopefully help conserve these deeply misunderstood creatures. So we are especially grateful to those who have taken the time to subscribe and review our podcast wherever you listen. This is super important for amplifying the podcast and growing our listenership. Which reminds me, you can now listen to Frass Happens on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and a variety of other platforms.
So tell your friends to listen. Tell your mom. I've been telling people in the grocery store who stopped me to talk to my baby.
I've been telling bugs on my walk.
Also, if you've been enjoying the podcast so far and you're looking to support us in a monetary capacity, we recently signed up for buymeacoffee.com. Through this website, you can send us a little cash gift, which amounts to about the price of a cup of coffee. To buy us a coffee, go to buymeacoffee.com/FrassHappensPodcast. The link is also in the bio of our Instagram account at Frass Happens Podcast and on our website at FrassHappensPodcast.com. And again, thank you all so much for being such an amazing community and for supporting our work.
Wait, what's the name of the podcast again?
Again, that's Frass Happens Podcast.
Now, on to the insects. For those who are already very familiar with insect anatomy and terminology, feel free to skip this episode. But I find that repetition is key when it comes to studying entomology, and I also think that we can sometimes forget the basics when we take these deep dives into certain topics of study or delve into a particular group of animals. I can tell you that I learned new things while preparing this episode, so I do truly think that it will be a really great way to brush up on your knowledge and maybe learn something new too. And for those who are listening who might be newer to entomology, we are so glad to have you join us, and we want you to feel prepared for future episodes on our podcast. So please stick around. We're going to be talking a lot about insects on this podcast, and while we will always try to define insect-related terms in future episodes, this crash course will be a helpful jumping off point.
I definitely know that I'm going to learn some new things. Also, one of the main ideas behind this podcast is to make entomology accessible for all people, and that starts with providing folks with the basics. We hope that this episode will be a useful resource that you can return to if you have questions down the line, or that you might recommend to friends and family who might be interested in learning more about insects.
So let's discuss what makes an invertebrate, an insect, and a bug. Katie, take it away.
So I'm going to get us started with a broad overview of how we define these different critters, and maybe clear up a few myths in the process. And then I'll turn it over to Casey for a more in-depth, specific look at insect anatomy. To start off, there are a lot of words that we use interchangeably for little crawly guys. Worms, slugs, insects, all of it. So since folks often use these words interchangeably, it can make talking about insects a little tricky, because what actually is an insect? For example, in my work, I tend to get a ton of questions about spiders, which, as you'll come to find out, are not insects. Luckily, I really like spiders, so I can usually answer those questions, but they don't actually fall into my area of expertise, just my area of interest. So the words that I'm going to focus on today are invertebrate, arthropod, insect, and bug, because I think these are all kind of a squishy mess for people. So we're going to work together to parse them out, and then Casey's going to tell us about specifically what makes these critters who they are.
Woohoo!
So I'm going to start with invertebrate. Invertebrate, in very simple terms, just means no backbone. It's not an actual taxonomic term. It's purely descriptive. It happens to describe about 95% of animal species. So 95% of animal species don't have a backbone, but it doesn't actually fall into any sort of taxonomic ranking. It's just a descriptive term that we've come up with to describe a whole bunch of critters.
Including my ex.
Your ex is spineless, Casey.
That's what I meant.
To start us off, I'm going to take us back to our high school biology class and take us through the taxonomic ranking list. If everyone remembers, it's kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. You guys might be more familiar with the mnemonic device. King Philip came over for good spaghetti. Casey, do you remember that, or was yours different?
I do not remember whatever I learned and used, but it definitely was not that.
I'm curious if you're listening and you had a different one. I want to know what it was, because it might be better than mine. This is just what they happen to have in my high school in Maine.
I want to come up with a new one on the spot.
Right? This is what Casey's going to be thinking about the rest of the episode.
Kittens playing chess on Frass. All right, kittens playing chess on 4 great spiders.
Oh, perfect. Everyone will remember that one.
Kittens playing chess on 4 great spiders. Kingdom,
Wow.
phylum, class, order, family, genus, species.
That's beautiful, Casey. But basically, the taxonomic ranking list is how we group all living things. Let's start with the broadest category, kingdom, which is comprised of Animalia, Plantae, Fungi, Protista, Archaea or Archaeobacteria, and Bacteria or Eubacteria. Some of these you might be pretty familiar with, so Animalia, that's animals. Plantae, that's plants. Fungi, all of our fungi. Protista might be a little more unfamiliar to folks. So these are unicellular organisms that have a nucleus, have a little brain. So this is like algae and amoebas. Archaea or Archaeobacteria, again, you might not be as familiar with. This is a unicellular organism with no nucleus, but one that likes really extreme environments. And bacteria or eubacteria also are unicellular organisms without a nucleus, but they don't like extreme environments. They just want to be in a nice, easy living situation. So those are our really big categories. And we're going to stick in animals because, believe it or not, insects are animals.
A few years ago, I was working in a vegan restaurant, and I had someone who was fighting with me. And this was when I was in school for environmental science, for wildlife and conservation biology. And this guy was fighting with me, telling me that mushrooms were animals.
What?
And so mushrooms shouldn't be on a vegan menu because they're animals. And I had to explain to this grown man what the different kingdoms were of living things and explain that fungi were different than animals.
So see, you guys, I mean, this stuff is going to come in handy no matter who you are or where you work, because you might have some guy come and argue, fungi are animals? But now you know better. So animals are a really big group. They don't include fungi, but they are a huge group. So now we're moving down to phylum, which is the Philip in the King Philip mnemonic device. So Arthropoda is the largest animal phylum. So these are what we also know as arthropods. And this is another one of the words that we're going to describe today. So in simplest terms, arthropods are invertebrates, and we already remember what that means, no backbone, with segmented bodies and jointed limbs. And this might mean nothing to you, but luckily, Casey is going to go into greater detail about these anatomical features later. But for you guys right now, just understand, arthropods, the largest animal phylum. So this includes major groups such as insects, myriapods, which are millipedes and centipedes, arachnids, which are spiders, scorpions, ticks, and other critters like that, and crustaceans, which includes lobsters, crabs, shrimp, etc. It used to include trilobites, if you remember those guys, before they went extinct. Y'all
I
remember?
remember them.
You remember trilobites?
Cambrian kids remember.
We remember. So trilobites used to be a part of this phylum, but then sadly they went extinct by trilobites. And this brings us down to class. And this is where we are at insects. See, we're just cruising right along here. We've already reached insects. About 90% of all animals are insects. So not only are they within the largest phylum, they're also the largest class. So insects are really everywhere. It's kind of crazy when you think about the amount of people who say that they love animals, but don't like insects, because that means that they don't like 90% of animals.
Yep.
So you can throw that stat at your next animal lover who actually just likes fur. Insects are found in both terrestrial and aquatic environments all over the world. The only place you really won't find them is Antarctica, because it's just really harsh and cold, and so it doesn't support much insect life. Actually, to date, only one native insect has ever been documented in Antarctica, and it's this teeny, tiny little wingless fly called the Antarctic midge, or Belgica antarctica. It literally is wingless, so it won't fly away in the high winds, which I just think is so precious.
Oh my God.
And it can survive at temperatures as low as negative 15 degrees Celsius, which is 5 degrees Fahrenheit. And it does that by like burying itself in the snow. It also takes 2 years for their little larvae to develop because they have such meager things to eat, like little tiny algae and things.
That's what I was going to ask. I was like, what the heck are these things eating in the ice and the snow?
Yeah, just like little algae and little lichens.
Little bits.
Yeah. So that's why it takes them so long to develop.
Oh my
But yeah,
gosh.
so if you go to Antarctica, you won't find many insects. So all those people who don't like insects can just go to Antarctica. Or they can listen to our podcast and learn to love them. That's the better idea. You also won't really find any insects in marine ecosystems because those niches have already been filled by crustaceans. And you're going to hear so much more about this when we do an episode on marine animal pollinators, which I didn't know was a thing until a couple years ago and is a really new strain of research.
I didn't know anything about that until right now.
Yup. So this is like brand new research that's coming out. And yeah, we're going to talk about it in another episode. So stay tuned. This brings us finally to order. And like I said, there's also family, genus, and species that fall under taxonomic rankings. We're not going to get into it because it just gets way too diverse. But just a quick note, when you look at a species name, so this is like the fun Latin name that's italicized, one word is uppercase. So this is the genus and species, just so you know. So this is like what the critter actually is.
Also, no one really speaks Latin anymore. So as long as you can spell it, say it however you want. There are so many different ways to say these Latin names, these species names. And so again, as long as we can kind of tell what you're talking about and you're able to write it from how you say it, you're doing great. So never get hung up on not being able to correctly pronounce it, because everybody pronounces it a bit differently.
Absolutely. Like there are definitely ones that Casey and I even say differently. We have Bombus griseoculus, also known as Bombus griseocolus, and both are correct. I get asked all the time, what is correct? And I'm like, whatever you want to say. Whatever
Tomato,
feels right.
tomata, griseoculus, griseocolus. We know what we're talking about, so it's
Did
fine.
you say tomato, tomata?
Probably. But hey, did you know what I was talking about?
I did, and so
Perfect.
That's fine. But back to orders. Some well-known insect orders include Hymenoptera. This one I think a lot of you are going to be familiar with. That's bees, wasps, ants, and sawflies. Lepidoptera, those are moths and butterflies. Diptera, flies, and Coleoptera, beetles. So these are some of the big guys that you might be more familiar with. This is also the taxonomic rank where we're going to finally chat about bugs and what the deal is with bugs.
What's the deal with bugs?
What's up with bugs? Are all bugs insects? Are all insects bugs? Turns out it depends on what you mean by bug. So if we're sticking in order and we're really sticking with taxonomic rank, there is an order called Hemiptera. And these guys are also called true bugs. This includes leafhoppers, aphids, cicadas, stink bugs, water bugs, and bed bugs. So, might not be the biggest fan of those guys, but they're a really beautiful, really diverse group. So, this is what we mean when we're talking about taxonomic bugs. And in terms of whether insects are bugs, that whole question, you can kind of think about it. Now we're going to geometry class. The fact that a square is always a rectangle, but a rectangle is not always a square. In this case, all taxonomic bugs, Hemiptera, are insects, but not all taxonomic insects are bugs. Things get a little flipped around when we go to the other definition of bugs. So this is the colloquial definition. It's how most of us use it. And this basically means anything small that crawls, flies, or wriggles. And this could include insects, spiders, millipedes, centipedes, worms, slugs. They all might fall under bugs. I know even some people who are like, are bats bugs? Nope. They're mammals. That's
but
kind
there
of
is something
stretch.
called a bat bug.
That is true. So
very
there we
similar
go.
to a bed bug.
Oh, only their bed is a bat. Aw, cute. So in this case, we use the same logic but flipped. All insects are colloquial bugs, but not all colloquial bugs are insects.
So what you're saying, Katie, is that shrimps is bugs, but only colloquially?
Yes. So colloquially, shrimps is bugs. We're really hitting on like the big topics here.
For those who might not be familiar with what I'm talking about, there is an ongoing online debate and a lot of memes related to this, where there was this idea trending of like, are shrimps bugs? And then a whole group of people are like, shrimps is bugs, which is just silly, right? So taxonomically, no, shrimps are not bugs, but shrimps is bugs. You know what we mean?
Shrimps is still bugs. I'm glad we can hit on some of these hard-hitting topics right here on Frass Happens. You heard it first. Shrimps is bugs. So that's actually the end of my segment. Now that we've covered these critters in broad terms, it's time to learn what actually makes these critters who they are anatomically, whether they be an invertebrate, arthropod, insect, or bug. And this is where I hand it over to Casey. Casey, class is in session. I'm handing the mic to you.
As Katie discussed, invertebrates are spineless. Invertebrates can be further divided into groups at the phylum level. We have annelids with segmented bodies like earthworms, mollusks in the phylum Mollusca with a soft body comprised mainly of muscle, which includes snails, clams, octopuses or octopi, and squids. But the largest animal phylum by far, with over 1 million described species, is Arthropoda, the arthropods. These include insects, arachnids, crustaceans, and myriapods, which, as Katie described earlier, are centipedes and millipedes. So I want to take a minute to talk about what all of the arthropods have in common. All arthropods have an exoskeleton, a segmented body, and paired jointed appendages. Basically, legs for the most part. Compared to mammals and other vertebrates, arthropods are considered to be inside out and upside down. But let's break down what that means, because the first time I heard that, I was so confused, but my mentor did an incredibly good job of explaining this, and it's stuck with me ever since.
Oh my gosh, I'm so psyched to have, I love a good memory device.
So vertebrates like us politely contain their skeleton inside their bodies. Invertebrates, on the other hand, have external skeletons. You can think of an exoskeleton kind of like a suit of armor that provides support, gives the organism form, and helps them not collapse into a soft, mushy, immobile blob, right? So they're inside out in that they have this external skeleton rather than an internal skeleton. So when you see Halloween decorations of a skeletal spider, now you can think about how truly anatomically incorrect that is.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's one of my other big grind my gears type of thing when I'm in Spirit Halloween and I'm like, why is that spider filled with human femurs?
Yeah. Yeah, a dead spider, if you had its quote-unquote bones, it's just gonna still look like a spider.
Yeah, exactly. So just hang spiders. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to pretend.
Their bones are the outside of their body. And this is also why we can pin and preserve insects in the way that we do, because their exoskeletons are able to hold their forms for many, many years after they die. So yeah, inside out. For the upside down idea, we need to take a quick peek inside these animals. Vertebrates, including humans, have a ventral heart and a dorsal nerve cord. Don't fret, we're going to talk about those right now. So dorsal refers to the back of something, kind of like a dorsal fin on a shark or a dolphin. The nerve cord in vertebrates travels down the backside. Ventral refers to the front or underside of an organism, basically where the belly is. So the hearts of vertebrates are located in a ventral position. If you think about your own body, your heart is located in your chest towards the front of your body, so you have a ventral heart, and your nerve cord travels down your spine at your backside. So you have a dorsal nerve cord. Compared to that, arthropods are upside down, meaning that they have a dorsal heart and a ventral nerve cord. So basically, it's all backwards from us. That's what we mean by saying arthropods are upside down and inside out compared to vertebrates.
Oh, I love that so much. I'm definitely going to remember that.
Everything that I've discussed so far relates to all arthropods. So these things are true for bees, true bugs, beetles, spiders, mites, millipedes, centipedes, lobsters, shrimps, pillbugs, which have about 1 million different common names depending on the region that you're in.
Roly-polies.
And many other critters. Yeah, woodlouse. So many different names for those things. Now that we've covered some general arthropod anatomy, I want to take us a bit more on a deep dive into insect anatomy. While Katie and I plan to discuss a wide variety of topics related to all sorts of different invertebrates, many of our episodes are going to be related to insects. So we want to make sure that we give you the tools that you might need to understand some of the terms that we're going to be using quite frequently in future episodes. Insects are also some of the most commonly encountered invertebrates out there, so we think that it's really important that you get to know your neighbors.
Yeah, and we're also really strong believers that the first step to caring about something is simply beginning to understand it a bit better. So one of our main goals with this podcast is to educate people on the incredible, wonderful world of insects so that we might come together to help care for and protect these misunderstood creatures. And a huge part of this includes encouraging folks to build supportive, interspecies communities. And just like building human communities, that first step of that is getting to know your neighbors.
Before we get into what makes an insect, I want to play a little game with our listeners. A little background about this game is that this is something that I love doing in my mentor's Biology of Bees course. I'm a guest lecturer in that course each semester, and I teach a series of classes on the natural history and identification of native bees. So on the first day of class, I have the students take a few minutes to write down everything that they know or think they know about bees. We collect the papers and hold on to them for the semester, and then towards the end of the semester, they do this again. And then they can compare their answers from the first day of class to the last day of class. And it's a great way for students to notice how much they've learned in just a few months. And it also helps us as instructors see what ideas and topics really stick with the students and kind of see what piques their interest the most. I'll also normally give them a cutoff of like 5 minutes to do this activity. So at the end of the semester, it is just so fun and kind of heartwarming as an instructor to watch them scribbling as fast as they can to write down as much information as they can in those 5 minutes because they have just learned so much in just a matter of a few months.
Oh, I love that.
I absolutely love doing it. I think it benefits everybody, and it's just a really fun practice to do.
Absolutely.
So I kind of want us to take a moment to do that as well. Before we get into the logistics of insects, I want you as a listener to pause this episode in just a moment and check in with yourself on what you know about insects. If you had to describe an insect to someone, what information would you include? If you're able to pause here, I would encourage you to do so and just think for a moment about what makes an insect an insect. So hopefully you took a moment to think about what makes an insect, how you might describe these animals to somebody else. And just a quick aside, I checked in with some of my friends and family who are not entomologists, and the overwhelming explanation was somewhat along the lines of a creepy crawly thing that has legs, sometimes has wings, sometimes has antennae, and has a hard shell. Which honestly is like pretty good.
Absolutely. And like I just talked to a little kid actually over the weekend who's knew I liked insects, and he was telling me, "Oh, my favorite bug is a millipede." And I wasn't about to like correct this child that it's not a taxonomic bug because guys, as we've talked about, colloquial bugs are a real thing. Because just the fact that this little guy was noticing these critters and like being able to even be like, this is a small sort of crawly thing, so it falls in this general category. I think that that's amazing because that's really the like we keep talking about first steps. It seems like we have a lot of first steps, but one of the first steps of learning how to care for these critters is just noticing them and really opening your eyes to those secret miniature worlds that both of you and I have talked about a lot here.
Yeah, no, exactly. I absolutely love that. Whether you know precisely what makes an insect, or you kind of paused and also thought something that's a creepy crawly thing with legs, don't worry about it, because by the end of this episode, you are going to know what makes an insect an insect. So let's start with some of the basics. Generally speaking, insects have 6 legs and 4 wings. However, adaptations have occurred in certain insect groups, and we'll briefly get into some of those adaptations and exceptions in just a little bit. There will also be future episodes all about some of those adaptations because some things are just way too detailed to get into in this crash course.
Oh yeah, these guys they're pretty weird and wonderful.
You'll hear me say generally speaking a few times throughout the rest of this episode because there really are just exceptions to everything.
Like they decided they just wanted to go a little further down the evolutionary chain. They're like, hey, whatever. I don't care about what makes an insect an insect.
Yeah, your rules don't apply to me. Watch this.
Little rebels.
As I go through this first lesson on insect anatomy, I want us to picture an insect that we have all seen. So for the sake of that, let's all picture a good old classic honeybee for this first part. If you're not driving, you can also pull up a picture of a honeybee to use as a reference while we talk about some of the external anatomical features of an insect in this first segment. Speaking of segments, insects also have segments. Insects in sets of 3 also go together quite nicely when we're discussing the basics of anatomy. The body is broken up into 3 main segments: the head, thorax, and abdomen. The head houses the eyes, mouth parts, and antennae. And yes, insects do have brains in their little heads too.
Beautiful little brains.
Beautiful little brains that are so much more complex than you could ever imagine.
So much more complex.
The thorax is the middle body segment and is considered the locomotive center of the insect, meaning that it houses the majority of the muscles that control the wings and the legs, which is largely how insects move through their environments. The abdomen is the final and often biggest segment of an insect's body. Many of the insect's vital organs are contained inside, including the heart, digestive organs like the midgut, and reproductive organs. So there's our first set of 3: head, thorax, and abdomen.
They kind of look like little snowmen. So if you want to think about like the head and then the middle part and then the big part, pretty much all those segments, they look kind of like a snowman.
I love that. Yeah, that is a pretty great way to kind of explain what an insect looks like in general. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, to get into a little bit more detail, let's start smack dab in the middle of the insect to talk about some of the other external features, mainly the legs and the wings. The thorax, that middle segment where the snowman's buttons would be, can also be separated into 3 parts. We have the prothorax, mesothorax, and metathorax. The prothorax is the first segment closest to the head. Then comes the mesothorax in the middle, and the metathorax before the abdomen. That's our second set of 3.
Well, 3 is my lucky number, so maybe that's why I like insects so much.
You're just really drawn to it. My lucky number is 42. So we'll have to find something that has 42 segments.
But that's majorly divisible by 3, Casey. It still applies.
Incredible. Like I just mentioned, the thorax is the locomotive center of the insect, so all their appendages that help them move are going to be attached here. Now, one of the things that irks me the most is when I see drawings or tattoos of insects and the legs are attached down the entirety of the insect's body, and I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. I recently got a tattoo of the derpiest little bumblebee, and while I specifically wanted him to be quite derpy, I did have to make sure that all the legs came out from the thorax because it was going to drive me insane otherwise. So if you're going to get any sort of tattoo of an insect, at the very least, please try to make sure that their legs and wings are coming from that thorax in the middle and not elsewhere on the body. Insects also have bilateral symmetry, which basically means that if you cut an insect down the middle, the left and the right side will be largely symmetrical. Whatever happens on one side happens on the other.
And this is actually logic that we use when we pin insects. So the general rule of thumb is to pin through the front of the thorax on the right side. So if you've ever seen a pinned insect and you're like, why didn't they put it right through the middle? Did they mess up? Like, it looks askew. We're actually trying to preserve at least one full side of the insect because they are bilaterally symmetrical. So as long as you have the pin only on one side, then you have a whole side that's totally untouched. And that means that there are going to be certain characteristics that you can look at to identify the insect under the microscope that won't have been damaged by any of the pinning.
Precisely. As we now know, insects have 6 legs, and they have 3 pairs of legs because of that bilateral symmetry. Each pair of legs is attached to each of the thoracic segments. The forelegs attached to the prothorax, the midlegs attached to the mesothorax, and the hind legs attached to the metathorax. So we have 3 pairs of legs attached to 3 thoracic segments and a body that is comprised of 3 segments: head, thorax, abdomen. So 3 sets of 3. People often call any little creepy crawly thing an insect, but unless it has 6 legs, it's likely some other type of invertebrate.
I feel like that's a game we tend to play with kids quite a bit when you and I do kids programs, because I feel like that's one of the easiest ones for kids to get right away is like you teach them that insects have 6 legs and then you show them a bunch of pictures of like a worm, a millipede, and then a whole bunch of insects, and they get it. They get it right away.
I know that brings it back to the basics, but like that can help you as you're maneuvering through your environment. You're hanging out in the garden, you look at something, and before you're like, this insect, blah, 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 you could be like, wait a second, is this an insect? Oh, wait, no, it is. It's a spider because it has 8 legs, not 6.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it is a really great kind of standard way to figure out if something's an insect or not.
Absolutely. And even just having that one fact in your back pocket is so empowering when you're out in the wild and like looking at stuff, because you can literally be like, well, I don't know what this thing is, but I do know it's an insect.
Although there are some tricksters out there. There are some spiders that use their first set of legs to look more like mouth parts. Yeah. So there are some tricksters out there, but don't even worry about that because they trick us too. My coworker actually sent me a photo of an ant mimicking spider, and I responded back and was like, "Oh, hey, I just saw some cool ants today too." And she was like, "Look closer." So we we still get tricked by these things all the time.
And I mean, we're the ones who are meant to get tricked by them, so it means they're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah. Now, the legs of insects can look drastically different from one species to another based on the different roles that they might be playing. We have kind of long, slender legs that are meant for running. We have other ones that are meant for jumping, like on a grasshopper or a cricket. We have raptorial legs that are like for hunting. Praying mantids have these raptorial hunting forelegs. We have other legs that are meant for swimming. They might have different like bristles and things like that on them. And we also have fossorial legs, which are meant for digging. So some insects are really great at digging into the soil, and their legs have adapted and evolved in order to meet those roles the best that they can. And I'm not going to get into all of the different segments of the legs, but at the ends of insect legs, they will have something called tarsal claws. So it helps them hold on to things. And so if you're holding something like a beetle and you feel that little bit of like almost like a scrape or a pinch or a poke, it's likely just their tarsal claws. They're not actually biting you or stinging you or anything like that. But beetles especially, I feel like, have really strong, prominent tarsal claws, and they kind of still freak me out sometimes when I'm holding them. But that's just something to think of when you're holding an insect. If you're watching it and it's not actually like biting you or stinging you, it's likely just those little tarsal claws, which are just something that hang out on their body, and they don't like retract them like a cat or anything like that. It just helps them hold on and maneuver through their environment.
It kind of feels like Velcro a little bit, if you're feeling them on your fingers. Like I remember I used to do that with monarch butterflies when I worked with them. I'd put them on people's noses so that they could feel what those little tarsal claws felt like.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's move on to the wings. Fun fact, Katie, did you know that insects are the only invertebrates that can fly?
No. Wait, really?
Yeah, I feel like now I know that, but that was something as I was, like, doing a bit of research for this episode. I came across that stat and I was like, I actually had no idea about that, but
Yeah,
it
I'm
makes
like,
sense
I
now.
guess, and right, like I'm thinking about it and I'm like, I guess not, but I guess I just never like thought about it. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's something that I've never considered, but insects are the only invertebrates that can fly.
That's wild.
And obviously, in order to fly, you need to have wings. So, again, generally speaking, insects have two sets of wings, so four in total. The mesothorax and metathorax house a set of wings for insects with two sets, and insects never have wings on the prothorax, again, that segment that's closest to the head. Now, obviously, wings are important for flying, and some insects are better at flying than others. And there's also many uses and adaptations to wings. Sometimes they provide a protective cover. Sometimes they help the insect produce sound. Sometimes they contain important visual cues for other insects or potential predators. They can help with the stabilization of the insect in the air. All sorts of different uses and adaptations. So I want to talk about two of the main wing adaptations that we generally encounter. Some insects have evolved to have hardened coverings of their wings. So beetles in the order Coleoptera have elytra, which are the rigid, sclerotized, or hardened front wings. These typically cover the delicate membranous wings, but also the soft abdomen of the beetle. And it also provides extra protection for beetles doing beetly things, whether they're digging in the soil, burrowing under the bark of trees, and it can also help hold moisture so that beetles can thrive in desert conditions with little water. So the elytra, these hardened front wings, have all sorts of different important uses in beetles.
Seems like a good evolutionary move on their part.
Yeah, and it's probably one of the reasons why beetles are so incredibly diverse.
1 in 4 animals is a beetle. It's so diverse. I actually, when I first got into entomology and I was kind of figuring out what I wanted to look at, one of the things I really wanted to do, because I love climbing and climbing trees, was to do canopy research on
Mm,
beetles because they discover new species all the time. So if you are a person who's like, I really want to discover new species of animals, get into beetles because you
yeah,
will. You'll probably name like 3 in your lifetime,
at least.
at least.
So some of my little fun party facts, at least they're fun party facts for me.
And me, I love them.
Well, I have two. So my first fun party fact is that there are more species of lady beetles, which are in the family Coccinellidae, than there are all species of mammals in the world.
What?
Yeah.
That's
So
wild.
this is what we mean by beetles are so diverse. And then on top of that, there are more species of weevils, which are in the family Curculionidae, than there are all fish.
Oh my God. Also, if anyone is like, what's a weevil? Just go Google a weevil right now. Their long noses just make my heart explode every time I see them. They're a very cute insect.
Yes, and that is what my favorite insect is, which is a giraffe weevil. So
Yeah.
weevils have real big long snoots,
The
and they
snootiest.
are incredibly diverse. Well, we told you that we really like to yap and we love doing little side stories, so hopefully you guys have been enjoying these. Now, back to some of the wing adaptations. Another common wing adaptation that we see are halteres, and this is what we see in flies. So, beetles, like we just mentioned, their forewings had evolved into these hardened wing coverings, but flies actually had their hind wings reduced into what we call halteres. So these halteres look like little teeny tiny nubs on stalks that stick out from behind the forewings of flies, and these serve as a balancing organ during flight. They act kind of like a gyroscope, which helps to maintain orientation. Flies are in the order Diptera, and they were named this because Diptera is like die, and then ptera, die meaning two, ptera, Ptera, meaning wing. So Diptera, Diptera, 2 wings. So
Oh,
flies
so
have,
fun.
yeah, so they have 2 developed forewings, and then their modified hind wings, which are called halteres.
But yeah, I feel like their flight is always something I use as a tool to tell people like the difference between flies and bees, because bees tend to have a very bouncy flight. And it's just because they're not as good flyers as flies are. So like flies are able to hover, they're able to buzz around, they're super fast. So if you're seeing something like zipping, it's probably a fly.
I want to take a brief aside to talk about why insects buzz, which I know is a little bit different than the external anatomy that we have been talking about. But if we look inside the thorax with these wing muscles, we have 2 different styles of flight that we can find. We have direct flight, which is what is found in dragonflies, because dragonflies are really primitive insects. And so, this direct flight, the wing muscles inside the thorax are directly attached to the base of the wings. So, when the wing muscle inside the thorax goes down, the wing goes up. And when the wing muscle goes up, the wing goes down. It's kind of like rowing. You can kind of think of it like that, where they alternate the way that they move.
Oh, interesting. That's really cool.
But most insects actually have indirect flight, which is a little bit more weird and complicated. And because this is a quick little aside and overview, I'm not going to get into the very, very specifics of it, but do want to give you a bit of an overview. So with indirect flight, the wing muscles are not attached to the wings. Instead, they're attached to the thorax. As the muscles move and contract, they deform the thorax and in turn cause the wings to move. There are a lot of muscles and nerves and physics involved here, but basically, as the muscles inside the thorax flex upwards, the dorsal surface of the thorax bows upwards, kind of like a balloon getting blown up, and that forces the wings down. Those muscles relax, and another set of muscles pulls that dorsal surface of the thorax back down again, causing the wings to flip upward. And this all happens incredibly fast. A honeybee or a bumblebee will flap their wings around 200 to 250 beats per second. Something like a mosquito will flap its wings around 700 times per second. And to compare that to something like a bird, a hummingbird hovering is around 80 times a second. So these wings are beating incredibly, incredibly fast with insects. When we hear an insect buzzing, it is largely attributed to the rapid oscillation of these muscles, which result in vibrations. And the pitch of the noise that we hear involves not just how fast the wings beat, but also the size of the insect. So a bumblebee, which is quite large and again beats its wings around 200 times per second, has a deeper pitch, that distinctive buzz that we hear. And in fact, when I'm doing bumblebee surveys, I actually use my ears just as much as I use my eyes because you can hear them from quite a bit a ways away because they're large.
Oh, I definitely do too. There was this one site in Ireland where like it was so windy, and I actually would listen for the bumblebees I was surveying by getting on my hands and knees and tilting my head to the ground so I could hear where they were in the heather around me because it was easier than trying to hear them through the wind.
Whoa. Wait, that's actually kind of crazy that you would do that.
Yeah, it was wild, but it helped me hear them a lot better.
But then we have something like a mosquito. A mosquito is smaller, so it's going to be much quieter, but the pitch is higher, which is why we hear that nasally, but only when it gets close to our ears.
Oh my gosh, that gives me flashbacks to like being in a tent and hearing one that got in.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny that you say like about like the different pitches and stuff, because this is where I know that I'm an ecologist, because I am always looking at like systems and like interactions between species, while I think you have like a much broader knowledge of anatomy. Spoiler, this is why she's doing this part. But it's like cool to hear about how these processes actually happen in the insect body, because I'm thinking now about like sonication or buzz pollination, which is a type of pollination that a lot of different bees can do, where they're able to buzz, as I always said, their wings, but not their wings. They buzz their thoracic muscles. Thoracic muscles instead. And that's actually how they do that process. And that's really cool to know.
And buzz pollination is kind of that distinctive thing that you'll hear bumblebees do on like blueberries or tomato plants, where they do like a bzz, bzz, bzz. And you guys are really just getting all of my insect sound bites right now.
You're doing awesome.
But that is the sound of a bumblebee buzz pollinating something that might be hiding the pollen away within its anthers, and that helps to release the pollen. So that bzz, bzz, bzz is a type of pollination that they do.
And this is why it's really important that we have this pollinator diversity, especially in these really important crops like blueberries or peppers or tomatoes, because these things do require buzz pollination, and honeybees can't buzz pollinate. So it's important that we have a wide diversity of pollinators, because not every pollinator is well suited to every plant.
Well, that just about covers the thorax, which again is the locomotive center of the insect. And we talked about a wide variety of things within that, right? We talked about legs and leg diversity, wings and wing diversity, wing adaptations. Why does an insect buzz? So we covered a lot of topics with that, but then we're going to move on to a new segment, which is going to be the head.
Ooh, yay! Top of the snowman.
Top of the snowman, too, yeah. Most adult insects have 2 compound eyes, but as I have already hinted at, there are always going to be exceptions to these things. So one of those exceptions is the whirligig beetle. These are in the family Gyrinidae, which is a very fun family name for them, because these are the beetles that you see normally in small groups on the surface of ponds or rivers, and they are whirligigging. They are swimming at the surface of the water in tight circles, and they're fast, and you'll never be able to catch them with your hands because they are just so incredibly quick. And so these beetles actually have 4 eyes.
Nerd.
Well, they don't have glasses like I do, um, but they do have a set of eyes above the surface of the water, and then they have a set of eyes below the surface of the water. And this is because they spend most of their life on the surface of the water, so they need to be able to look out for potential predators and other different environmental cues at the surface or above the surface of the water, as well as beneath it. And there are some really cool studies about the differences between these sets of eyes because seeing in water versus air is vastly different. And so they need to have different physical attributes of their eyes in order to take in the visual information. We also have something like a strepsipteran, which is a twisted wing parasite, which you can kind of find underneath the abdominal segments of wasps, especially paper wasps. And they have crazy eyes because their eyes are like raspberry clusters. They can have clusters of like up to like 50 or even more eyes, and those all have different images being sent to their brains, which is just wild.
That is wild. I feel like it would look like a kaleidoscope when you're looking through them.
It probably does. And that is a wonderful segue because most people think that something like a fly is going to also see like a kaleidoscope where they get the same image projected, 1,000 times. So they see like this cartoon of like a woman coming at a fly with a fly swatter, and the fly sees that, but 1,000 times in each eye, right? And that's not how these animals actually do see. So each of those little eye segments or facets just gives them a portion of their viewpoint. So they're not seeing an image repeated again and again. It's more of a mosaic that gives them a really full picture of the environment around them. And flies especially can process visual information very quickly, which is why they can almost always see you coming, and it's really hard to catch them or swat them. They basically are experiencing you as if you're moving in slow motion. So if you want to catch a fly, it's actually better to try to move very, very slowly until the very last second rather than go at them really fast, because they're going to not only see you doing that in slow motion, but they also can detect air current differences. And so if you try to swat them, you're not going to be able to because they're going to probably fly away.
I wish I could give this advice to my dog, who's always trying to snap at flies when we're outside. I'm like, buddy,
yeah,
going faster isn't going to help.
It's not. In addition to those 2 main compound eyes, generally speaking, many insects also have something called ocelli, and these are simple eyes, and these are found on the top of the head, between the main eyes. Many flying insects have them because they mainly help the insect with learning more about their environment, largely picking up on light intensity, helping with orientation. With those simple eyes, there's really no image details that they're able to process. However, additional information that may help the animal as it moves through the landscape is processed. So again, things like light and orientation. Insects are able to combine information processed through both the simple eyes and the compound eyes in order to react appropriately to external stimuli.
And I feel like that really ties into what we were saying before about how insects might be small and have very tiny brains in their tiny little heads, but they have a brain that can combine all of this information that they're taking in through many eyes. Like our brains only are using our 2 eyes, and these guys are looking through both simple eyes and compound eyes.
Yeah, I think if you're going to take nothing else away from this episode, you should hopefully be recognizing that insects are a lot more complex than we might have initially thought.
Yes, absolutely.
Going back to the eyes, I had a friend who was at trivia who texted me about this. And so they were concerned that the trivia host had actually gotten the answer wrong, because the question was, how many eyes do bees have? And the correct answer was 5. And so they texted me to see, is this correct? And I said, technically, yes. Bees do have 2 compound eyes and 3 ocelli, or those simple eyes. So yeah, technically they do have 5 eyes, but really they have 2 big ones.
Yep. And they're arranged so cute. I really love how the simple eyes are in a little triangle on their heads. It's just so pretty.
Yeah, that's also one of my most favorite things when I'm starting to teach native bee identification, because when the students start to look at bees under the microscope for the first time, there is always someone who goes, what are these dots on the top of their head?
Oh my
And then I get
gosh.
to explain to the class what ocelli are, and it's just a really fun moment.
Oh, I love.
Also, insects aren't the only animals that have these simple eyes. Other animals, like some vertebrates, can also have ocelli or a singular ocellus. So bearded dragons have a simple eye as well. I had a bearded dragon growing up. His name was Miko, after the raccoon in Pocahontas.
Oh my god, that's adorable.
I noticed that Miko had this little dot on the top of his head. And so I looked it up and found out, when I was in high school, that my little bearded dragon had a simple eye, or ocellus. And that helps them pick up on things like, again, light intensity. So if a shadow passes over them, that means that there might be like a bird of prey ahead of them. And so that is how these other animals can also gain additional information from their environment.
So cool. Insects. They're just like bearded dragons.
That's what we say. Right now, I definitely have never said that one before. But it is just cool to see how these different anatomical features have evolved in different groups of animals, right? Like, these serve an important purpose because we see them evolving multiple times. Like, eyes have evolved multiple times.
Yeah.
And it's just really cool to see.
Oh, it's so fascinating.
Get it? It's really cool to see.
Oh my goodness. Turn her mic off. Turn her mic off.
All right, let's talk about insect mouths, just briefly here, because these are incredibly complex, and we have already spent quite some time talking about insect anatomy. Insects can have a variety of different types of mouth parts, and these are often suited to the different food types that they're going to be eating. Whoever named insect mouth parts were a little bit too straightforward, I think, but it does help in explaining what they do. So the first one that I'm going to talk about are chewing mouth parts. And these are...
Wait, I know what this one does.
What do you think it does?
I think it's for chewing.
Great job. Yeah. So things like grasshoppers, these more like primitive kind of insects, these have mainly chewing mouth parts, which are going to help to chew leaves or whatever else they might be needing to rip apart and eat. We also have things like rasping, lapping, and these are the mouth parts of insects like thrips, which are going to be kind of slicing away at vegetation and lapping up the juices.
Yum.
There are also mouth parts called sponging mouth parts. And sponging mouth parts are made up of a proboscis, which is like a tongue, but then it has this kind of fleshy, sponge-like lobe on the end of it that helps them eat with that portion of their mouth parts. And that's going to be something like a fly, right? And you can kind of visualize that flattened part at the end of their mouth parts, eating whatever it may be. Some juice from a fruit, some juice from the trash, whatever it could be.
Trash juice.
Trash juice. Next, we have piercing, sucking mouth parts. These are things like mosquitoes, where it's able to pierce through, some sort of substance and then suck up a liquefied substance from that.
Ooh, I was actually just wondering. I know in our last episode you mentioned that only 1/3 of mosquitoes are blood-sucking. What do the other 2/3 eat?
Mostly nectar. So mosquitoes are also important pollinators.
I figured. When you mentioned that now, I was like, wait. Oh, it's probably nectar.
Yeah, mosquitoes and then their closely related relative midges are some really great pollinators too.
Oh yeah, midges. They pollinate, isn't it chocolate?
I believe so. Yeah, there is a species of midge that I think is the main pollinator of cacao.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah. So, piercing, sucking. They do exactly what they say they're going to do, which again is kind of helpful, but also kind of silly when you're talking about mouth parts. Next, we have chewing, lapping. And this is something like a bee. So bees have mandibles, which do the chewing portion, and with those, they're also able to manipulate things. Like for a honeybee, they can manipulate wax within inside the colony, or something like a leafcutter bee. They actually can use their mandibles to chew or cut pieces of leaves, and we'll talk about that at one point in the future. And then they have their main proboscis, which they use to help lap up nectar from flowers. And then the last of the mouth parts is going to be siphoning. And this is what a butterfly or a moth has, right? So they have this curled up, big old straw tube-like structure for mouth parts, and then they can unravel that and have it go down into a flower, and they can suck up some of the nectar and liquid from the flowers. So they can siphon it through this big old tube that is their mouth.
And some of these guys have really long proboscises. So I'm trying to think of a few examples. One is like Darwin's hawk moth. They have what, a 12-inch proboscis?
Mm-hmm.
And this one was really cool because there's this orchid where is it? Is it in Madagascar?
No, I think the orchid, I'm not sure if it's also in South America, but it can be found in the Florida Everglades.
Oh, so cool. But basically, this orchid was discovered and it has a really long nectar tube. So basically just this long tube-like structure with nectar at the bottom. And when I think it was Darwin who discovered it, was like...
It was sent to him by a friend.
Oh, yeah, because he hated orchids so much.
Darwin hated a lot of things.
I love Darwin's notes because he will be like, I hate all orchids. They are very bad, because he had been studying them for so long. He was just sick of them. And I'm like, I feel that when I'm really deep in a project. I'm like, I also hate this. But yeah, his friend sent it to him and he was like, what creature could suck it? And it wasn't until years and years later that someone was actually able to like witness moths visiting this orchid. And it turns out even though the hawk moth does visit it, it doesn't pollinate it because its tongue is actually too long. And I think, isn't there a documentary about this, Casey?
Yeah, it's a short, like 15-minute documentary that you can find just on YouTube, and it's like the pollinators of the ghost orchid. So this orchid is incredibly rare. It's found up on the trees in like the Everglades of Florida, and I did look it up really quick. It's in Florida and Cuba.
In Cuba, okay.
Where you can find this orchid. But yeah, these people hiked through the Everglades in water up to their chests with all this gear and expensive camera equipment. And then they climbed up these trees to where these orchids were blooming and set up their cameras and let them roll. And whenever something came by and visited the flower, they were able to get shots of this. And this was, only in the last couple decades that they were able to finally document the visitors to this rare ghost orchid. And yeah, like Katie said, it actually, I think they might have documented the Darwin's hawk moth visiting this, but they realized that the body was too far away from the reproductive parts of the flower to be a successful pollinator. So it's likely that it's actually a hawk moth that has a slightly shorter proboscis that visited it, that is its main pollinator.
So see, there's still lots of mysteries out there, and sometimes it takes like literally generations to figure them out. Like they weren't able to even begin to answer this question until they had night vision equipment, which obviously they didn't have in the time of Darwin.
Well, that is going to be our quick little segment on mouth parts. And the last part that I want to just talk about really quickly on the insect head are going to be the antennae. And the antennae actually play a really, really important role for insects because this is largely how insects smell. They don't have nostrils and noses like we do or like a dog does, but they can pick up on different chemical signals and pheromones from the environment using their antennae. With their antennae, insects can detect humidity, pheromones, wind speed, sound, vibrations, and other different chemical and mechanical signals. These have all different forms. We have things that look really kind of long and skinny. We have other ones that look like brushes. We have some that are plumose that look like big fans. You can kind of think of that almost like a Luna moth antennae, if you can picture that in your head, or if you want to take a moment to look that up.
They have the fluffiest antennae. Oh my gosh.
They do have really fluffy antennae, and the males are going to have fluffier antennae because they're the ones that seek out the females from the pheromones that the females emit. And so the males have to be able to pick up on those signals. And so they have larger antennae in order to successfully do so.
Oh, like little satellite dishes. I love it.
Exactly that. A quick little fun fact for antennae and how sensitive they can be with certain species. The endangered American burying beetle, which is Rhode Island's state insect, is able to detect a dead animal, which is what they use to feed their larvae, from up to 2 miles away just an hour after the animal has died. That is so soon into decomposition, and these beetles from 2 miles away can smell that, and they can come flying in order to claim that dead animal to feed their larvae, which is just absolutely insane that these antennae can be that sensitive.
That's really wild. And I think it's also, I think sometimes people hear something like that, like, you know, a beetle can sense a dead body like that far away, and they're like, oh, gross. But like, thank goodness they can, because it's these little decomposers that literally clean up our world's messes. Unless you wanted, to smell a whole bunch of dead bodies, you really want those beetles to smell them first.
We have insects that help to control, or help with decomposition of other insects, that we're not crunching on insects everywhere we go. We have other ones that will help to decompose these animals, turn them into other nutrients in the soil. All of these insects are playing such important roles in the environment, and we wouldn't be able to exist the way that we exist without them.
Yay, we love them so much.
Well, this has been a heck of a journey, and the last body segment that we have to talk about is the abdomen. The abdomen is oftentimes the largest of all of the body segments, and this is because it holds all of the important organs for respiration, digestion, and reproduction. It's basically the juiciest part of the insect.
Which is also why if you come across a dead insect that has been eaten by something, often it's the abdomen that's missing, because it literally is like the yummiest, juiciest part with all the good stuff, all the good proteins and nutrients.
There's not much on the outside of the abdomen that we have to talk about, because the head has the eyes, the antennae, the mouth parts, the thorax has the legs and the wings, and the abdomen, a lot of the stuff that's happening in there is internal. For the sake of time, I don't want to go too into some of these more complex processes for this introduction to entomology crash course, but I do want to take a moment to mention some of the big questions that we get about insects that can relate to the internal anatomy of the insect, and a lot of the processes that are happening inside the abdomen. Namely, do insects have blood? And how do insects breathe? So for that first question, the short answer is yes, insects do have blood, but it's not like the blood that vertebrates have. All vertebrates have what we call a closed circulatory system. This basically means that the blood travels throughout the body through transport tubes of some nature. These circulatory systems can vary quite a bit, but for mammals, blood is going to be circulated through veins and arteries. Insects, on the other hand, have an open circulatory system. This means that their body fluid circulates inside the entire body. It's kind of just like sloshing around in there.
Oh my God.
Nothing really
Yum.
controls the insect blood. Which is also why it's so important that they have this exoskeleton to hold everything inside, right?
Absolutely.
Also, insect blood isn't quite the same as blood found in vertebrates. Instead of blood, it's actually a fluid called hemolymph. This hemolymph lacks red blood cells or hemoglobin, so instead of looking red like vertebrate blood, it actually can appear clear or green or yellowish.
And this is also why, like, if you hit a bug with your car and it smashes on the windshield or something, it's usually not like red that's sloshing against your windshield. It's usually like, yeah, a green or clear or maybe a bright yellow. If you ever do like slap at something and it does like come away red, that's because it's either your blood or someone else's. It's not theirs.
Dude, if we were hitting insects with our cars and it was little blood spatters, like red blood spatters on our window shields.
Oh my gosh. Be like a freaking Tarantino.
Yeah. I also just said window shields instead of windshields.
Hey, you know,
you guys, it's been a
we're
long
on day
day.
2 of recording this, and it's been a lot, but we're so excited about it.
Yeah, little murder scenes on your windshield. At least they're not red. They're gonna be little splotches of yellow.
Yes, a little bit more palatable.
So, yes, insects have blood, but again, not like what we have. Another common question that we get is, how do insects breathe? Well, they don't have lungs, so they breathe a bit differently from you or me. Instead of having lungs, which process the oxygen, insects have these small openings along the sides of their body called spiracles. It's almost like little portholes that you would find in like a boat.
Aww.
So these external openings are like little valves that can let oxygen into the insect body and CO2 out. Air enters through these spiracles and into the respiratory system of the insect, which is essentially made up of what we call trachea. And the trachea is a complex, branching network of tubes that subdivide into smaller and smaller tubes, which will reach every part of the body and deliver oxygen directly to different tissues and organs inside the insect's body. When I think about the tracheal system within an insect, I kind of go back to the cartoons that I grew up on. So I go back to like the Jimmy Neutron brain blast. Like,
oh my gosh,
you see the brain and it's like going down these tubes and they get narrower and narrower and they like keep continuing, right? I don't know if that helps you think about the Jimmy Neutron brain blast to see how the air is kind of transported throughout the body of the insect.
Oh my gosh, I used to love that show. What a weird show.
It was so weird, dude. It was so good, though. I feel like it was, like, one of the first, I don't know. There are so many shows that we grew up in that, like, really focused on, like, science and young scientists, I'm kind of realizing.
I loved, like, Cyber Chase, which, like, taught you math.
Cyber Chase, for real.
Cyber Chase, we're moving.
Maybe that's why we're scientists, is because we grew up with, like, Dexter's Laboratory and Jimmy Neutron and...
yeah.
Powerpuff Girls. I don't know. Like, there are so many little scientists out there.
Absolutely. I think so. I mean, I really liked all of those. Maybe it just showed us that, like, nerds could be the main characters.
Oh.
Yeah. I like being a main character nerd with you.
Same. All right, you nerds out there, let's keep talking about insect breath. A lot of the smaller insects are able to rely almost exclusively on passive oxygen diffusion, just, air entering through the spiracles, being transported, CO2 coming back out. It all works wonderfully. However, a lot of the larger insects require an active ventilation of that tracheal system, especially in times when the insect is going to be under heat stress or is really active. They need to be actively pumping oxygen throughout their body. So they're able to do that by opening and closing the spiracles as needed, and then they also use abdominal muscles to expand and contract their bodies, which is mostly visible in the abdomen when this happens. So if you see an insect pumping its abdomen, it's actually breathing. As they expand their abdomen, they take in more oxygen through those spiracles, and then as they contract it, air is expelled through that tracheal system to all of their different important tissues and organs.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people, when they see insects doing this, they get nervous that it's like gearing up to sting them or something, like it's pumping up their stinger.
Especially with like a yellow jacket or a honeybee or something.
Yeah, but usually it's just they're breathing, and especially if they're really pumping it, it might just mean they're hot.
Hopefully this is one of those times where like understanding that and knowing that is what is happening when an insect lands on you and is pumping an abdomen. You can take a moment to be curious about it, and you're like, wow, it's hot. It must have just been flying and now it's trying to take a rest. So we really wanted to cover breathing because we think that it is an important concept in insects that people don't really think about. People don't really think
Yeah.
that insects don't have lungs and that they don't breathe like us. And instead, they have to manually pump these muscles in order to send oxygen throughout their body. Well, that's pretty much where I will end you for this crash course into insect anatomy. We talked about some complex ideas. We breezed over a few others that we'll talk about in future episodes. But I really hope that this helps you get a little bit more of a grasp on what makes an insect, what makes an arthropod an arthropod, and will help you as you, journey through your garden and look at the little critters that are around you.
Oh, Casey, thank you so much for that really great deep dive into insect anatomy. It's definitely been a while since I've brushed up on my insect anatomy, so this was such a good refresher for me, and I definitely learned some new things, and I'm sure our listeners did too.
Yay! I'm so glad that you enjoyed it, and I got to learn a lot of new things too and be reminded of certain things. So, this was just such a fun episode to do. Since we did go over a lot of new information, I think it might be a good idea for us to listen to some main takeaways from the episode. Katie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So let's all travel back in time to the beginning of the episode for just a moment. The main things I want you to take away from my broader overview are 1, about 95% of animals don't have a backbone, and those animals are invertebrates. Number 2, despite rumors to the contrary, insects are actually animals, and in fact, insects are most animals. And 3, an easy way to think about insect classification is to think of a Russian nesting doll. So those are those dolls inside of dolls inside of dolls. So an animal is the biggest doll, that's kingdom. Arthropods are inside of that, phylum. And insects are inside of that one, class. And then things get kind of nuts diversity-wise when you get into like order and family and genus and species. But maybe just imagine after you open the class doll, a whole bunch of insects just come pouring out. If that gives you a good memory image. Just diversity.
And most of it's going to be beetles.
It's really mostly going to be beetles. And then finally, in terms of the question, is an insect a bug? The short answer is, it depends on what you mean by bug. Do you mean a taxonomic bug in the order Hemiptera? Or do you mean a colloquial bug? Basically, any little crawling, buzzing, or wriggling critter. Yeah, those are my main takeaways. What about you, Casey? What are your main takeaways?
Well, for my segment, when you think about the different arthropods that you might be encountering, whether it be an insect or a spider or a lobster, I want you to know that they all have an exoskeleton. So their skeleton is that hardened outside shell, if you will. They also are inside out and upside down compared to us. So again, talking about that exoskeleton, how they're inside out compared to vertebrates, and upside down, and that their nerve cord and heart are opposite ours. For insects specifically, they have 3 sets of 3. So for their anatomy, they have a head, thorax, and abdomen. The head has all different sorts of goodies on there, like mouth parts, eyes, and antennae. That's how they get a lot of their information about what is around them. The thorax is the locomotive center of the insect, so it holds a lot of muscles inside there, and it's where the wings attach and the legs attach. And then we have the abdomen, the juiciest part of the insect, and there are all sorts of crazy things that happen in there, from their reproductive organs, their digestive tracts, and how they breathe, how they circulate blood throughout their body, all sorts of good stuff there. Insects also have 6 legs and 4 wings. However, remember that that is generally speaking. Because this is such a diverse group of animals, we are going to see a lot of different adaptations and exceptions to some of these rules. Also, insects are so much more complex than we might initially realize, and we're learning more about them every day. So we are so glad that you are on this little journey with us as we also continue to learn more about insects.
Yeah, I mean, we are lifelong learners. We love sharing this stuff with you, but it also gives us an opportunity to keep up to date with current research and current cool facts about insects, because it really does change every day. There are a lot of them out there, and there's a lot to learn. Well, that wraps up our Insect Anatomy Crash Course episode. We hope you learned a lot and hopefully had fun along the way.
Thank you all for joining us, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and rate our podcast wherever you might be listening. And we'll be back in another 2 weeks with another episode of Frass Happens.
Okay, love you, bye!
Be nice to bugs! Let's make taxonomy fun.
That's literally what I'm trying to do over here.
Taxonomy fun. What are we doing? We're making taxonomy fun.
Making taxonomy fun.